Welcome everybody. There it is. Perfect. Welcome everybody to the Ogden-Layton Area Technical Advisory Committee. My name is Spencer Brimley. I'm the chair of the committee and I appreciate everybody attending today. We've got several elected officials and staff and other council members on, and so we appreciate everybody joining us today. Jory Johnner is going to do kind of a roll call or explain how we're going to do that, and then we'll proceed on with our meeting. Does that sound good, Jory?
Perfect. So we'll keep this simple, alphabetical by community and organization. So just unmute. If you can also do us a favor, if you click the three little dots in the top corner of your picture frame, you should be able to halfway down or at the bottom say rename. So if you want to be Ogden, you can do that. So yeah, if you can, am I breaking up?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, what I tried to say was click the three little dots in the top corner of your screen, click rename, put down your city, local community, organization. That'll help us know who's who, because there's quite a few new faces. All right, let's go through this and hopefully my internet holds strong. Bountiful. Box Elder County, Brigham City, Centerville, Clearfield,
Spencer Brimley, Brad McElrath, Tyson Stoddard. I think they're all here.
Great. Clinton,
Peter Mattson here.
Peter, Davis County.
Hey, Bartley Matthews here.
Oh.
Farmington.
Shannon Hansel. Lyle Gibson too.
Dave Peterson is on.
See Dave. All right. Far West. Fruit Heights. Harrisville. Hooper. Kaysville.
Tammy
Sorry.
Tran.
Yep, Melinda Greenwood.
All right. Hey, Tammy. Hey, Melinda. Layton City.
Joy Petro.
Weston Apollonie.
Hi, Mayor.
Chad Wilkinson.
Oh, awesome. 3. Hey, Chad. Marriott Slaterville. Mida.
Ariana Farber.
North Ogden.
If Scott Hess, Kai Johnson, and Brandon Bell should be on after a phone call, and our intern Stephen Thomas.
Perfect. North Salt Lake City.
Sherry Pace.
Holly Avery and Mackenzie Johnson.
Planning City Council Chair Ted Knowlton also. Ogden.
Barton Brierly, and we should have Brandon Ripien here.
Brandon Ripien right here.
Great. Perry. Plain City. Pleasant View. Riverdale. Roy. North or South Ogden.
Steve Parkinson with Roy. Sorry you missed me, buddy.
I'm cutting out. I think I said Roy, but all right, Roy. Would not leave you out. South Ogden. South Weber. Sunset. Syracuse. Uinta. Washington Terrace. Weber County. West Bountiful. West Haven.
Matt Jensen here.
All right, thanks, Matt. West Point.
Fred McDonald.
All right, thank you. Willard. Woods Cross. UDOT.
Eldon Bingham with UDOT Planning.
Hey, Eldon. UTA.
Matt Gray, UTA Planning.
Joel Bishop, UTA. Hey, Shul. Federal Highways. Wasatch Front Regional Council, scanning here, it looks like we've got Hugh, Rosie, Michaela, Ted, Lauren, Byron. Byron is new to WFRC. He's with our Community Economic Development Group. We've got Julie, Nikki, Megan. I don't think I missed anybody, but if I did, hopefully that's the Wasatch Front crew. Envision Utah.
We do have Jordan Chandler joining us.
Dang it, I admit that twice now. I'm gonna get fired. Sorry, Jordan. Jordan just started on Monday with our ops org group. So you will see her quite a bit when you come to our office and get to know her more over time. Anybody else that missed? Look like in the chat, Mayor Tran Kaysville, thank you. Anybody else? All right, Spencer.
Okay.
Back to you.
All right, Jory, thank you so much. Appreciate that. And again, just a reminder, as people jump on from your organization, throw their name in the chat. Just make sure we keep track of everybody who's joined today. So first item of business on our agenda is consent. So we have minutes from the July 13th, 2022 meeting for approval. And so any questions or considerations on those before we take a motion on those? All right, seeing nothing, motion to approve the minutes. I need a motion to approve the minutes from July 13th, 2022.
Motion to
This is
approve.
Joy, I'll make. So I'll say.
Okay, so we got a motion from Steve Parkinson, Roy City, and a second from Mayor Petro, I believe. And so we'll just do any opposed to approval of the minutes. Go ahead and speak up. Otherwise, we'll consider them approved. All right, very good. Thank you very much, everybody. Next item on our agenda, item number 2, is Wasatch Choice Fall Transportation Workshops for the 2023-2050 RTP. And we're going to turn some time to Jory and Julie on this one. So.
All right, you get more of me. And when I forget something, Julie will step in and clarify or fix. Can everybody see the presentation? Thumbs up. All right. Let's jump in. If you have not heard of the Wasatch Choice Vision, welcome to the Wasatch Front area. The Wasatch Choice Vision is the umbrella coordinated effort between economic development, land use, and transportation. Underneath the transportation piece of it is the Regional Transportation Plan. And also underneath that would be all the implementation, including the programming of funds, statewide, local, and federally. The Wasatch Choice Vision has 10 regional goals. You'll see them on the side: livable, healthy communities, quality transportation choices, clean air, ample open space recreation opportunities. The Regional Transportation Plan is developed through those 10 goals, pretty, not exclusively, but through the lens of them throughout the entire planning process. The Regional Transportation Plan is multimodal: bikes, ped, cars, transit, all tied to land use, updated every 4 years. It's financially constrained, meets our air quality conformity and our budgets. And it's not just between now and 2050, but we identify when projects are needed by 3 to 50. We have been working with you all over the last few years. The RGC TAC is our kind of key stakeholder, and we utilize you all as planners to develop the RTP. So you helped us review and explore external forces and policies. So we did that a few years ago. You helped us draft a preferred scenario. We went out to your communities. We've worked with UDOT and UTA on this scenario. needs-based phasing this last spring, and just at our last July meeting, we presented to you the first cut of the financially constrained plan. We'll be going out for public comment this winter, so like in January, February timeframe, with final adoption this fall. So this is a little bit of a reminder of the process. We identify those needs, financially constrain them. You'll see a yellow bucket on this one. So that would be the projects that are needed, but they're unfunded. As you all know, we rarely have enough money in to meet all of the needs we want to do. And so that's where that goes. What might be most important on this and why we want your eyes on the financially constrained regional transportation plan is almost every transportation funding source is tied to our regional transportation plan. So all the state's funding, nearly $1 billion a year funding. The WFRC federal programs that we program through our transportation improvement program tied to our long range plan. Your local sales tax and programs that each of the counties administer, registration fees, corridor preservation are all tied to the regional transportation plan. So it's important that we get the right projects identified in the first phase, because when you want to go apply for funding and build those projects, that's what they're going to be looking at to make sure that it went through the planning process and it was included. So brings us to the financially constrained plan. We have about $1 billion of identified funding for active transportation. This is existing funds and new funds, about 17, almost 18 billion for roadway and about 5.5 billion for transit. As I mentioned earlier, we don't have enough funds to meet our needs. So you can see here the needs in the light blue are higher in all three categories, slightly higher on active transportation, about $10 billion gap for roadways, and about a $3 billion gap for transit. So we will need your help identifying those priorities, and you've already started helping us in July. But this is broke out by phase. And you can see here that it's a little bit front loaded, which is normal, right? Our plan goes from 2023 to 2032 in phase one, but that doesn't mean that starting in 2023, we have no transportation needs and then we develop 10 years. We have a backlog of needs, which is why our plan has more needs identified in the first phases than in the end, because it's really the 10 years worth of needs in phase one, plus whatever we haven't gotten to in the last decade or so. As I mention, we took comments for about 3 weeks this summer. We talked to you all at the planners at RGC TAC and the Transcom TAC, which is your counterpart at your local community, the engineers, and received over 200 comments, almost 250 comments. And you can see the breakout there, 86 comments on roadway, 11 on transit, 120 comments on active transportation. And we've been following up, doing one-on-one emails, one-on-one meetings, coordinating with UDOT and UTA on all these comments and updating the plan. During that same time, we asked you all to review the household and job forecast. And so Bert brought and our analytics crew brought before you in our last meeting the household job forecast map. We've taken comments on that over the last couple months, and that is being updated as we make changes. So if you go into this map, and I'll provide a link for you all for this, when you go into it, it is, call it real time. He's not collecting comments and then going to make a change to the population employment. A lot of great features in this. You can look at it by traffic analysis zone or TAS. You can look at it small areas or kind of medium districts. And the jobs are broken out by a bunch of different industries along with households, population. So take a look at this. If something, a big red flag pops up, please reach out to us. We want to get that resolved prior to adopting our plan, but hopefully you've had a chance to review this. Did I break up, Spencer?
Yeah, what was the red flag thing? If you see any red
If you
flags,
see a red flag, reach out to us and we will, so coordinate with you on the population employment projections by these areas. Hopefully you've looked at it and you feel comfortable with where it is, or you've reached out and we've made the changes. But we are willing to take comments still, but hopefully we've gotten them all done. Let's see. For the Wasatch Choice map, we took comments this summer, as I made mention. We have a new map that we will be using. And there it is in the chat. We're going to be using this interactive map for the Wasatch Choice regional transportation plan projects. A lot of great functionality within this interactive map. You could sort by project type, road, transit, active transportation. Even within that, if you want to just look at new capacity, or you want to look at a certain type of transit project or active transportation project, you can sort by that. If you're just interested in local community projects, right? Like take UDOT projects off the table, you can sort the projects by locally owned projects, or if you are interested in which projects are just UDOT projects, you can sort it by UDOT projects. And a new added feature is if you want to look to say, well, if a project's needed in phase 1, but which ones aren't financially constrained in phase 1, you can do that function within this map. So get in there, play around with it. We're updating the map and the functionality. We want this to be a really useful tool that you all can use. And so get in there, look at it. If something still seems off in the financially constrained plan, where you were thinking, well, wait, this project needs to be in phase 1, or wait, this isn't going to be needed until phase 3. Come to the Wasatch Choice workshop in preparation to have that discussion with us. We're Nikki, Hugh, Lauren, Julie are diligently reviewing this, balancing the budget, right? So projects that move up in phase will need to move things back in phase, and vice versa. If you want to move something back, that opens up something to move forward. Look at that, and we're still in the comment taking, and that's what we're going to be focusing on at the workshops. Uh-oh. Oops, I didn't mean to click on that. That opened up a link. Next steps, workshops, stakeholder outreach. So we're holding 8 workshops. I'll show you the schedule. Hopefully everybody on here has the workshops on their calendar. If not, get a hold of me and Rosie, and we'll make sure you get added to our workshop schedule. We're going to reach out to key stakeholders, including the universities, key landholding groups, other interested transportation agency or groups interested in transportation, coordinating on the Unified Transportation Plan. Made mention we're going to go to public comment January, February, with adoption in 2023 May. The workshop agenda at a high level is this. We know that invitees will include mayors, city council, planning commission, city managers, economic development directors, engineers, and planners. Along with, this time we are inviting staff for our state congress, congressional districts, and we're inviting our state legislators to these workshops. So with that, we start with the basics, right? We're going to remind everybody what the Wasatch Choice Vision is, the role of it, and the regional transportation plan. We're going to look at emerging trends in transportation. We're going to talk about how and have a conversation with you all about how to optimize our system through policies and innovations. And then we're going to get into the draft regional transportation plan on how to enhance the system through, capacity increasing projects, which is the link that I've showed you through workshop or for the interactive map. And then we'll work on next steps. These are the 8 workshops throughout the Wasatch Front. They're going to be in person, 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, each of them. Box Elder County, Tuesday, October 11th. Northern Weber, Monday, October 24th. Northern Weber meetings at North Ogden Council Chambers, Box Elders at the Brigham City Hall. We have North Davis, Wednesday, November 9th. That'll be held in the Clinton Recreation Building. We've got South Davis, Monday, November 14th. That'll be located at the Davis County Building, room 131 or room 131. And then South Weber, Wednesday, November 16th. And that will be at the South Ogden City Hall. So look at the interactive map, discuss it internally. Please encourage your planning commission, city council, mayors, county commissioners to attend this. It's really important. It's unique opportunity to have these conversations. Ted, do you have anything to add? I've noticed you unmuted earlier, but wanted to get through this at least.
Well, maybe we can say we're out of the pandemic. Jory mentioned this, these are in person. I think that there's the transportation questions, but there's also the networking. And, you know, I can't think of another opportunity where groups of adjacent communities can get together, both staff and elected and your state representatives, and sort of get to know each other a little bit. And so there's opportunities and uniqueness to this in addition to the agenda. And then on the agenda side, all of that is going to be custom fit to the story of your area. So anyway, be there or be where.
Any questions on the work we've been doing on the regional transportation plan, upcoming workshops?
So it looks like, Jory, there was a question about the time. It's 4 to 6 for all of those meetings. Is that right?
Yes, 4 to 6. And they should, we've sent out calendar invitations.
Okay.
And we've tried to invite either the planning manager or planning director, economic development directors. If you're interested and you didn't make that cut, then we can definitely add you. We want, you know, as many people and the right people in the meeting that have been working with us. Oh, yes, some Skittles maybe, and some Scooby snacks as well. So
Taste the rainbow. Very good. Well, and I think so, Jory, would it be out of place to say if you haven't received an invitation but are interested in attending, to either plunk your email in here or to reach out to a member of the WFRC staff? What would be the best way to do that?
Throw your name in the chat or email Rosie.
Okay.
And she'll put her contact. It's just rosie@wfrc.org. And we'll maintain our contact database. You'll receive some upcoming information prior to the workshops. And if you have not received it, we may just have an incorrect email for you. So don't feel like you're being left out. We utilize these workshops to not only meet with you, but to update our database. Because there's always lots of movement between communities.
Well, and that was the point that was brought up earlier directly to me, that we have people on this meeting who used to work for one city and maybe work for another city. Just the ones I know off the top of my head: Peter Mampson at Clinton, and Melinda Greenwood at Kaysville, and Brandon Ripien up in Ogden now, right? So there is some movement of staff relative to that. So being mindful that if you need to update your contact information with WFRC, especially for this group, please make them aware of any change that may have happened in your professional career, so we can make sure we're getting you the right information. So.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Spencer.
You bet. You bet. And congratulations to all those people who have moved on or moved up or, you know, found an opportunity for their career. So we won't recognize individually, but I think it's important to note that happens all the time, and good luck and congratulations to those peeps. So, okay. Jory, anything additional for that item? Excuse me.
None, unless anybody has a question.
I don't see any additional questions. There has been some contact info in the chat, so we'll let people respond accordingly. We'll move on to item number 3. And I think I saw John Perry on here, but maybe Scott jumped on as well. But Weber Basin Water Conservancy District updates. Is that right, John? Did I see you on here somewhere?
I am here.
All right, we're going to turn the next 15 or so minutes over to you for some updates.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate the invite. And if Scott's here, he can jump in at any time and correct any misinformation I may be giving the group. But we were asked just to come on and give you guys an update as to any legislation that's affecting land use and water, programs that the district's engaged in, studies that might have impacts to your guys' operations. So I got a presentation here. Looks like I can share my screen. And that's not the screen. I struggle with this every time.
It did pop up.
Okay, you can see that presentation then?
Land use and water planning.
Okay, good. So real quick, I work with a lot of you guys on a day-to-day basis. We've been engaged in conversations about various conservation programs and operations of the district. But just for those of you that aren't aware, why Weber Basin, why should you listen to us? Well, we're a large regional water supplier up here in northern Utah. 5 counties make up our service area, about 2,800 square miles in size, 700,000 residents. We got 7 dams that we operate, 3 power plants, 4 water treatment plants, over 500 miles of pipeline that facilitate both retail, secondary irrigation deliveries, as well as wholesale to irrigation companies and municipalities, water providers. And within Davis and Weber counties, we've got the largest contiguous secondary water system in the nation. So that's estimated to be about 110,000 connections. So when you hear about bills like SB 242, which we'll talk about here in a second, where it's requiring metering of secondary systems by the year 2030, that's going to be a huge impact up in our area where, at least 110,000 of those 240 total in the state reside. Okay, so what are we dealing with over here? Well, as a large regional water provider, one of the biggest things, challenges that we're looking to tackle here in the next several decades is the growth. And you guys are well aware of that as you talk about transportation issues and some of the patterns that you're experiencing. Not too long ago, it's expected that our population would double by the year 2060. Well, doubling of our population with the limited water resources that we have in our area is certainly a challenge. And certainly an opportunity for us as a water provider and developer to engage in constructive dialogue with entities like yourselves, municipalities, city engineers, planners, to start bringing together that whole land use planning, water demand nexus, and see what we can do to optimize and stretch out those limited resources that we have. So when you look about the projected increase in population and what that means to our projected water supplies and demands, this is a graph right here that's for the state, and Weber Basin's graph looks very similar to this, where you can see that lightly graded shade area that starts in the year 2000 kind of projects the anticipated water demands if we had a continuation of the demand patterns we were experiencing back in 2000. And you can see that balloons by the year 2070 to an additional 720,000 acre feet of water. We've obviously had conservation efforts and programs that we've been engaged in. Our residents have been cognizant of kind of the climate that we reside in. And so if you go to 2018 and kind of project those water use patterns out there, you can see that $720,000 is reduced, but still, quite a jump there. And then 2030, based on conservation plans that we've had over the last several years, you can see it's an even greater reduction. I think the thing I would highlight in this graph is that there is a huge opportunity through conservation programs, land use planning, to implement policies and programs that have a huge impact on how much water we need to support a growing population. So as we go into this, we're going to talk about some of the policies that the district's engaged in, some studies and plans that we're doing. But the first thing we were asked to do is kind of give an update on recent or upcoming legislation. Obviously, upcoming legislation will give you some insight into what we're hearing. But the first thing I think we could talk about is the recent legislation. So these were all bills that either passed or were presented last legislative session. And this is just a small subset. There were quite a few. If you go onto the website and just put water as the keyword term on legislation from last year, you'll come up with probably 50 or so bills in one form or another, we're dealing with water. These ones are probably the most critical or probably have the biggest impact to our operations. So the first one being HB 410. So this is one that came on kind of late in the legislative session, but Great Salt Lake Watershed and Enhancements. What this bill does is it creates a trust that has $40 million to go out. They've been tasked to go out and get more water to the Great Salt Lake. And so you might be thinking, well, what is that? That sounds, great, and it is great. But what it does do is it certainly provides challenges to those tasked with ensuring adequate water supplies to our growing population, in that we've got added competition, right? If any of the expectation was we were going to get a lot of this through our ag to M&I conversions, acquiring existing water rights and moving them over to where the population centers are, development projects from outside sources, we now have a competing interest that is the Great Salt Lake. Once again, the Great Salt Lake is a natural resource that should be protected, but it is an increased complexity to the environment for operating. HB 33. So a lot of you are probably aware that the state of Utah operates underneath the prior appropriation doctrine, first in time, first in right. HB 33 is an initial stab at facilitating additional beneficial uses, temporary leases of water rights for in-stream flows. And so you can see that there's already some finagling and some massaging of language that's dictated, water right law in the state for the past, as long as the state's been around. HB 242, secondary water metering amendments. So like I mentioned, 110,000 connections of the state's estimated 240 reside within Davis and Weaver counties. So you will probably have citizens and residents that will be impacted as a result of these secondary or these irrigation companies trying to comply with this law by the year 2030. The district itself, we've got about 23,000 retail customers on our secondary system. About 13,000 of those are metered, and that's been a good decade in the work. And so we got a lot of irrigation companies that are going to be knee deep in this over the next decade, trying to figure out how to fund it, how to get them installed. Supply chain issues with all this pandemic stuff that's gone on has certainly added some complications to that. But that's something you should be aware of. HB 121, water conservation modifications. That's one that I believe, look it up. SB 110, water as a part of general plan. So that's one I think that a lot of your entities are going to be impacted by. It requires essentially that as part of the general plan, there's now components within that plan that require water reduction and water conservation to be included in those plans. Water-wise landscaping amendments. So this is, not basically adjustments that allow for water-wise landscaping to be incorporated, where you can't have, HOAs and entities can't restrict it. They can put certain regulations on it, but it has to be something that's allowed. SB 89 water amendments, SB 152. So you can see there were a lot of different bills dealing with water rights, dealing with landscapes, and how our communities are utilizing the water, as well as water right law. Moving forward, we're already aware of a few bills that are on the docket. Some of those have to deal with the reuse of water and the utilization of reuse projects within a closed basin that may have impacts on the Great Salt Lake, as well as legislation on how the state of Utah calculates its GPCD, or gallons per capita per day. And so these are all things that we're going to be monitoring to make sure that we incorporate them into our plans, and we can continue to plan to meet the water demands moving forward. As far as district programs, they're basically broken up into education, incentives, and metering and policy. As we go into this is taken from our water conservation and management plan. You can see that we've got a lot of conservation programs that are either already going or planned to be implemented here in the next few years. And once again, they're broken down into education measures, incentive measures, and metering and policy measures. Obviously, on those metering and policy, or specifically the policy, we're looking to have a lot of involvement and collaboration with our municipalities and customer agencies to see how we can implement kind of that water use demand onto the land use planning, that the decisions that are being made. You'll look at a lot of our programs, and they're very focused on outdoor landscaping. Generally, what we're seeing within our service area is that a typical household's water use has nearly 70%, and it can be 70, 80%, but on average, about 70% of their household annual water use is going on their landscape. And that's water that's evaporated. It's water that's used for the plant, turf grasses predominantly, that don't make it back to the system. Our indoor water use, we can handle a lot of indoor water use, because what happens? Well, you flush the toilet, you let it go down the drain, it goes to a wastewater treatment plant that discharges it back into the system. And so, we're looking at how we're going to meet these regional conservation goals and extend the existing supplies. And our programs are going to be heavily centered around landscape modifications. I've appreciated a lot of the dialogue and the engagement that I've had with a lot of you in working through landscape ordinances to make sure that our new growth and our new development is held to a higher standard, a standard that meets some of those conservation goals that the state's put out before us that we've had to adopt. And so I appreciate your time. I hope to be able to engage with more of you moving forward. And if you haven't heard from me, reach out to me, because I'd love to engage in that conversation. There's no less impactful or less, minimizing of cost time to make these changes than at the time of construction or development. Anytime we do it post those things taking place, there's incentive monies and there's a lot of cost and rework of things that have to be done. So get at it in front. We're going to be better for it. Real quick, education measures. So we continue to engage heavily in public and school education programs. We have Davis School District, various grades coming in and touring our facilities, being educated in conservation programs. We brought Weber County School District schools in as well. We have garden fairs. We have classes that are offered for free to interested citizens. We've offered the Quell classes to quality water efficient landscapes. We're trying to educate contractors on efficient irrigation design and management, water loss training, water audits, and then obviously a lot of our social media and billboards to educate the public on what's going on. Incentive measures. We've been actively and continue to be engaged in smart controller rebates, both of the commercial and residential side of things. Toilets, again, commercial and residential. Turf removal. So this is a fairly new program we've been engaged in over the last year, where communities have adopted water-wise ordinances. We will facilitate essentially paying residents $1.25 a square foot to remove turf grass and replace it with water-wise landscaping in their park strip areas. We've got commercial grants for landscapes and then wholesale contract reduction programs. And you can just see some of those graphs that kind of show the interest in those programs. Another thing that we've got going on is our customer portal. So once again, education and letting people know what's going on, how they can be more efficient with their water use is critical in everything that we're doing. So you can see we've got a customer portal where people that are metered on our secondary retail system can get on, set up usage alerts, leak alerts, all sorts of different customized alerts on that portal to be notified when they have issues, when their operations are outside of the norm, or they've got continuous flow going through there. And so we've seen drastic reductions in uses of water when individuals are using these programs, as well as just increased utilization of these resources in general. This is our Flip Your Strip program. So you can kind of see the monthly participation cumulative. Like I said, we started this about a year ago. We've got over 1,300 applicants on our books. We've paid out over $300,000 in rebate programs to date and have another $800,000 to $900,000 on the books if all these projects would carry through to completion. The identified square footage on these removal programs is about 15 acres of turf grass swapped out for some water-wise landscaping. Just as we talk about water savings there, the typical turf grass, typical resident in a park strip application is probably putting down 40 to 45 inches every year. We estimate that on a water-wise landscaping with drip irrigation, even with some fairly dense vegetation going in those areas, it probably drops down to 10 or 15 inches. So there's massive amounts of water being saved as we engage in these programs, and we'll continue to push them. Planning for the future. So we've recently completed our water conservation and management plan. So we will continue to push out the programs and policies that are identified in that plan to help us meet our conservation goals. Our drought contingency plan. So real quick, we'll just go through here why we're doing it. On our water conservation management plan, you can see those blue dots on the left side of the screen is kind of what our area's GPCD has been. We need to get down to about 175 to meet the state's required conservation goal by the year 2060. So we got a lot of work to do. You can see the blue dots are actually where we've been. So 2015, we were actually pretty low. It was a wet spring, a little wetter of a year, cooler. But normally we're up around that 270 mark over the last several years. And so we've got a lot of work to do, and this conservation program and management plan is something that's going to help us get out in front of this. And so if there's anybody that's interested in that, reach out. I can get you a copy of that. You can see what we're doing. Drought contingency plan. What do we do when droughts occur? Well, real quick, I'll just give you an idea of why we have had such drastic watering restrictions over the last several years. The district has a storage capacity in our reservoirs of just over 400,000 acre feet of water. We typically store 200,000 every year. And so we draw down on those reservoirs, we replenish them based off the runoff from the snowpack that we get. In 2020, we were able to store 22,000 acre feet of water. So a drastic reduction. 2021, 7,000 acre feet of water. And then in 2022, we should update this slide. It was anticipated we were going to have about 15,000. Things were a little bit better there. I think we got about 40,000 acre feet that we were able to store, plus an additional 20,000 through contracts that we entered into with neighboring conservancy districts to keep that over on our side of the drainage. So you can see when we get 3 consecutive bad years, something's got to give. Right, and that's what we've seen in these watering restrictions, these delayed irrigation startups, is kind of that playing out. And so, how did we come up with those restrictions? Well, it was our drought contingency plan. We went through and did a very exhaustive, paleohydrology analysis to see how our basin has behaved historically, how often we'd be in exceptional drought categories, extreme, severe, moderate, or advisory type situations, and then based on the frequencies with which those were occurring. Had our systems been in place, we were able to generate kind of these mitigation measures and these contract reduction volumes based on what category we were operating in. This was a very aggressive stakeholder engagement. We brought in agricultural users, industrial users, municipalities to kind of truth these out to make sure that what we were proposing was palatable and efforts that everybody could buy into based on what our storage volumes were. And so I can tell you, having a drought contingency plan on the books that had public buy-in and stakeholder buy-in, CERT has been helpful in these last 3 years. The timing couldn't have been better. I hate to be going through these drought scenarios, but having a drought contingency plan that gives you kind of the platform upon which to operate rather than knee-jerk reactions has been very helpful. We've also got a first of its kind climate vulnerability study where we actually went in and looked at the global climate models and had them downscaled both statistically and dynamically to give us a better idea of how our drainage basin would be impacted potentially by the different climate scenarios that are being modeled at a global level. And so now that we've got these models in place, we're able to incorporate that data into our planning documents to make sure that our programs, whether they be conservation or development or anticipated water demands on our landscapes, are all incorporating some of these anticipated impacts. And so we're able to incorporate that latest and greatest data there. And finally, supply and demand studies. So we're updating that to incorporate all those documents, our drought contingency plans, our climate vulnerability studies, the anticipated population growth. So we appreciate some of the work that your group is doing to help us get those populations broken down into more granular levels to help us facilitate, kind of that infrastructure planning. And the last thing I'll bring up is the state's regional water conservation goals document. So this was completed back in 2019, broke the state down into, I believe, 9 different regions. You guys can count them and call me out if I'm wrong on that. But basically, recognizing the unique climates and microclimates that exist within the state of Utah, the general water use patterns and beneficial uses that we have in these different areas, they gave us goals that based on legislation from last year became our goals. So we required to have these as being what we're going to make into the future. So if you look at the Weaver River, I already mentioned this, 2015 baseline of 250 gallons per person per day. We got to get down to 175. And so when I say we got to get down to it, it's going to include all of us. We're all going to have to work together. We're going to have to be, collaborating to make sure that decisions made at your levels, decisions made at our levels are all working to make this goal a reality. And so that's kind of the long and short of it. Hopefully that gave you guys some insight on what we're doing. I think the one thing I would stress is that, hey, we want to be engaged. We want to be participating in any of your efforts as it relates to that land use, water demand nexus kind of planning. So this year's next time you're sitting down in your planning meetings, if you've got opportunities for developments or things like that are taking place, reach out. We'd love to be involved and just give you our insight into what that means You know, your local water providers will be looking for that same interaction. And so if there's not any questions, I mean, that's what I've got.
Thanks, John. There was one question about the availability of those slides, if they could be made available for the group.
I will send them over.
Okay. Oh, it looks like Jory responded already. I apologize. I'm a little behind, but they will be provided. So perfect. Thank you so much. Any questions for John relative to water? It's been an ongoing conversation, obviously a very important one, but any specific questions from the group?
Just curiosity, John, you said about $900,000 in rebate or whatever, still kind of pending projects or whatever, the liquor strip. So when you said you figure there's been about 15 acres swapped, is that projects that are done, or does that include that?
Yeah, so we've got probably about 5 acres that have actually gone through and had rebate monies given to them. And if we look at the total application list and the you know, square footage or areas that they've given us, we would be up to about 15 if they all went through.
Do you think that's still, I don't know, what is it, just an initial outreach, really popular? Is it building popularity of the program, or is there?
Yeah, I think it is building in popularity. You know, we can look at each of our, Lyle's aware of this. I've worked with Lyle. He was great to work with on his landscape ordinances there in Farmington, but we've asked communities to adopt those ordinances. And so what we see is once those ordinances are adopted, we'll get probably a neighborhood where there's a couple people that take advantage of it. And suddenly we've got, you know, 15 more within that neighborhood that are taking advantage. So as people are made aware of it, as they see kind of what's happening, we are seeing a lot of growth and in popularity. And if we look at some of our sister agencies, Jordan Valley, they've been doing this a little bit longer than us, about 4 years. They see the same thing, right? As we have increased attention to water and kind of our utilization of it, people are drawn to programs like that. So we'd anticipate kind of a steady utilization of that incentive program moving forward.
Do you just want to quickly speak to the fact of when the water will be, the secondary water will be turned off?
We'll be shutting it down September 26th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Brandon from North Ogden asked if the ordinances were adopted that were just mentioned. Lyle, was your guys' ordinance adopted? I know Clearfield adopted an ordinance, but did yours get passage?
Yeah, Farmington City passed one this spring, I think it was.
Yeah. Brandon, was that your question? I want to make sure I don't misrepresent or inaccurately state what you're asking. Okay, perfect. Okay. Well, John, thank you again for your time. We appreciate the presentation, the update, and the information, and we'll look forward to September 26th when the water goes. Okay.
All right.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. All right. Item number 4 on our agenda is Michaela, TLC project brainstorming. So with that, we're going to let Michaela pick our brains for a minute, it sounds like.
Yes.
There's not much there for mine. Okay.
Can you all see my screen? Perfect. All right. So as Spencer said, I'll talk about the TLC program because the letters of intent are due next week. So as many of you know, TLC provides planning technical assistance to local governments. TLC aims to help communities achieve your plans for growth and achieve your goals and plan for growth. And TLC has these 4 major program goals centered around travel options, communities to live, work, and play in, maximizing the value of investment in public infrastructure, and enhancing access to opportunities. And a great thing about the TLC program is that it is a collaborative partnership between UTA, Salt Lake County, UDOT, and Wasatch Front. And not only do all the partners support the program through funding, but also through providing expertise and technical assistance. So as you're thinking about projects for this upcoming application cycle, know that TLC has funded a variety of different project types in the past. We have supported small area plans such as town center master plans, active transportation plans, studies, general plan updates, and regional visioning efforts. TLC projects can, come in a variety of forms. You can have kind of a more traditional planning document that is kind of the end product of your effort. You can have a project that focuses more on policies. So if there are communities on the call who thought, oh, that's cool that Farmington and Clearfield have updated their landscaping ordinances, that's something we'd like to do. Updating your ordinances is absolutely something you can use the TLC program for. And then we can support other products as well, such as financing options or implementation strategies and scenario plans. So I'm going to hit on a few different categories of topics that TLC can support your communities on. The first is Wasatch Choice implementation. So TLC hopes to help communities implement our shared regional vision. One way that you could use TLC to do this is through investigating if your land uses and your upcoming transportation improvements are compatible with each other. You could also look at your future centers and see if there are any barriers to the kind of development you're hoping to see in those centers. You could look at access to opportunities. For example, are you interested in optimizing access between residences, jobs, and community necessities through both mobility and proximity? So considering how land use relates to transportation and how transportation relates back to land use. As I mentioned before, we can look at ordinances and zoning. This can take a variety of different forms. You could ask questions about, are there parts of your ordinances that are incompatible with each other? Do your ordinances reflect your latest land use planning efforts, or have you recently updated your general plan but have yet to update your zoning codes? And do your transportation ordinances support safe, user-friendly streets and transportation choices for all, which is one of our shared Wasatch Choice goals? And finally, you could ask questions and pursue planning efforts related to quality of life for all residents. So are there unique communities in your city that you aren't reaching with your standard public outreach? If so, perhaps using TLC to support a strategic plan for public outreach for those communities could be really helpful. You could look at neighborhoods that you might want to better understand. And you could also think critically about parks and public spaces through like a town center master planning effort or an access and feasibility study for a natural or park space. So applying is a two-step process. The first step is to submit a letter of intent that is due next week, September 29th. It's a really simple, just give us a basic description of your project, what you're intending to do, what you're hoping to accomplish. And then the application is due in December, on December 8th. It does include open-ended questions about the project, and make sure that you answer every single question and that you give us as much information as possible. Saying like same as above or not applicable don't really help us envision what you're trying to accomplish with the project as fully as it could. So just keep that in mind when you get to the project applications. These are the project selection criteria. They are available on the TLC website. Note that the TLC goals and the Wasatch Choice vision are part of project selection criteria. So make sure you're thinking about how your project relates to those. The interactive map is a really great resource for brainstorming project ideas and seeing examples of successfully awarded projects. If you click on any project on the interactive map, it'll show you their application. And if a project's complete, then you can see the final report or study or plan that went along with that project. So after applying, we make awards in March, And then funding becomes available on July 1st, 2023. And projects can kick off anytime after that, whether it's on July 1st or you want to wait until May of 2024. It's up to the timeline of you and your community. So as I mentioned, the letters of intent are due next week. That is true not only for the Transportation and Land Use Connection Program, but also for 4 other programs that we have: surface transportation, congestion mitigation and air quality, carbon reduction, and transportation alternatives. So those 4 programs, as well as TLC, all have the same application cycle. So they all have their letters of intent due next week. If you're not sure which program your project best fits with, just submit it to one of them anyways, and we'll make sure it gets funneled into the right place. If you have any questions about these upcoming funding programs, the ones that are due next week, you can reach out to Ben Withrich for the first 4 that I just mentioned, and Megan Townsend for TLC. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Michaela, I put the link in the chat for those.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
I've
you,
got a
Michaela.
question.
Oh, Brad.
Could the TLC program, or maybe one of the others might be better suited for this, but assist in designing a corridor? For example, working with UDOT to redesign maybe some lane striping, the pedestrian realm of a street when it comes to the sidewalks and streetscape, as well as some active transportation on street parking. Is that something that we could use that funding for, or would it be another one of those programs?
So it depends. TLC can only do up to 30% design. So it's before pre-engineering and before any final design. If you wanted to explore different different access points or how that corridor could look in different ways, and you wanted to get public feedback on different, like basically scenario designs or for that corridor, that could be eligible, but just a final design itself wouldn't be.
I often, it's a fine line between what is considered TLC eligible and planning, and when you cross over that line into more of the the engineering and design space. But I often say, if you're considering things beyond the curb, if you're considering the relationship to your buildings, the way the pedestrian space kind of interacts from private to public, and that kind of outreach piece that Michaela mentioned, it's a good chance that it's TLC eligible. And if it really is about a final cross section and the rest of it's worked out, it's probably beyond what TLC can help with.
And I had another question. I looked at your pre-approved consultants list within the last week, and there was a consultant that I would have liked to have been on there. And I'm just wondering, for this next round of projects, I saw also on the website that there's a new selection round for pre-approving the consultants. When's the deadline for submittal for them for future projects?
Megan, do we have an exact date yet?
There's not an exact date posted yet, but it'll be mid-November. So we open that pool. You're right. You're exactly right. The pool will actually be wiping completely clean. This is the consultant pool that we use for TLC. It'll also be the pool that we use for any station area planning work. That pool will be completely clearing out. So if you do have consultants that you like working with, it's wise for their business typically, and for potentially your project partnership, to let them know that between October and November, that RFP will be open to consultants.
Okay.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks.
Good question. Yeah.
All right, Brandon, Brad, thanks for your questions. Michaela and Megan, thank you for the teamwork on the answers. Great. Any other questions on TLC or the program itself from the group? All right. Hearing none, seeing none, we're gonna move to item number 5 with the study updates. And first, we're gonna have Safe Streets and Roads for All from Kip. And then we'll have a little bit on zero fare transit study from Julie. So Kip, take her away.
Thank you. I trust everyone's seeing my screen all right and hearing me.
Yep.
Okay. So you've probably heard something about the Safe Streets for All program. It's a new program, part of the Investment in Infrastructure and Jobs Act. So we're kind of exploring new territory with this, but I will let you know what the program is about and what we've done so far and what's coming next. So the Safe Streets for All program is a Federal Highways program designed to help local communities address roadway safety issues. In this chart, see the dark blue bars are freeways and interstates, and the sky blue are arterials. The gray is collectors and others. And so freeways are by far the safest roadways we have in terms of the number of fatalities and serious injury crashes. In the rural areas, these roads are mostly state-owned and operated. But in the urban area, you get a lot of locally managed roads and a large number of fatalities and serious injuries on those facilities. The states have some resources to deal with these rural areas. Cities and counties, not so much. So that's who the program is intended for. And it fits into the new paradigm that Federal Highways is trying to promote, also named SSA, but in this case, it refers to the Safe System Approach. And that's to change the mindset that seems to exist that, well, accidents happen and there's a chance you get injured or killed on the roadways, to one where a new paradigm where yes, humans will make mistakes, but those mistakes should not result in a fatality or serious injury. So that's the focus of the program and where it's headed. So the Safe Streets for All programs $1 billion for each fiscal year now through 2026. And in order to access these funds, first there needs to be in place a comprehensive safety action plan. And that's what we've been working on so far. The reason, well, WFRC got involved, a number of communities came forward about this new program, and Federal Highways said, well, we want this done on a regional scale, comprehensive approach, not just everybody doing different things. And so Wasatch Front was asked if we could produce this multi-jurisdictional effort. And so that's how we got involved. There's not a formula that allocates a certain amount of these funds to each state. It's a nationally competitive process to access these funds. As I mentioned, states are not eligible for these funds. It's for local governments, and it is targeting roadway projects. A 20% local match is involved in each case. And then, as I mentioned, there's the first step is this safety action plan. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. The action plan, again, focuses on fatal and serious injury crashes, and we'll look at those by location and try to identify common risk factors and effective mitigation strategies to address those. It may be that there are some hotspot locations that are identified in the analysis in the action plan, but again, the intent is to discover risk factors and strategies that can be applied universally. So I've got a different slide that talks about the next steps. That's a little more visual. So let me skip to this one. So this program was announced back in May of 22. And for the last several months, we assembled a planning committee with representatives from each of the counties, UDOT, UTA, and several cities have stepped forward expressing interest in the program. So they've all been part of this planning committee. We just passed the first deadline of on September 15th to submit our request for a grant to do the action plan. So we requested a little under $1 million. We will know here by January of 2023 if we were awarded that grant and how much. So between now and January, we will the planning committee will be working on documents, RFP documents, so that when the award comes, we're ready to begin the process of selecting a contractor to do the action plan. So that action plan will probably take all of 2023 and maybe into 2024 for the communities out there. Starting in spring of 2024 is when you want to be thinking about putting together grant requests for safety projects in your community. And the action plan would serve as a resource to identify risk factors and strategies that you could apply. Let's see. And I wanted to emphasize this is not a program that's going to be managed or administered by Wasatch Front like the ones Michaela was just discussing. This will be up to individual cities to put together their grant requests consistent with the findings in the action plan. We don't know exactly how much will be available to Utah. As I said, it's competitive nationally. But if everybody in the country were equally eligible, you know, we're talking about maybe 10 to 20 million available to Utah, but that remains to be seen.
Can I make a quick interjection?
Yes, please.
So, you know, Kip is just talking about this pot of money, which is competitive. On top of that, there's more funds for projects that are roughly similar within the WFRC formula programs, which includes the transportation alternative. There's a new one called the sorry, Kip, what is it called? The new one, it's the
rural one?
Carbon reduction program.
Yes.
And so here's my point. My point is that between formula funds and these discretionary funds, there's a lot more money for you to potentially get to help you with things that can help people get around without a car. And so this is a really great time to be, I'll just put it this way, a greedy. You know, ask for, be aggressive. Don't think about the availability of funds of the last few years. Think about something different. And, you know, we generally, as a general matter, we want to try to connect you with money. And so we can talk. Some steps have to be gone through, like the SF4A plan, and some steps you don't really have to. You can just go ahead and send us a letter of intent this fall. I hope that point generally made sense, and Kip, feel free to elaborate on my.
No, thank you, Ted. Are there any questions then about the Safe Streets for All?
Doesn't look like there. Let's see here. There's some comments there, but it looks like they've been responded to. Julie put some stuff in the chat. I think, yeah, I don't think there's any additional questions out there, Kip, that haven't been responded to on the chat. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, one thing I wanted to mention, if there's anyone out there that wanted to be involved in this planning committee and it hasn't been to date, my contact information's up there. It's not an exclusive group by any means. We welcome anybody who wants to be involved.
Perfect. Thank you, Kip. Some great stuff, great information. As Brandon said, exciting concept, a lot of great things out there. So thank you for that presentation. Julie, I think the time is now yours.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Spencer. So I'm just going to give you a brief update on a study that the transportation agencies in the region kicked off a few months ago. This regional zero fare study is to evaluate the effects of eliminating fares on the UTA services. We saw in the last legislative session 2 bills that came out, that both of which would result in UTA not being allowed to charge fares. So sort of in response to that, and trying to add data to that conversation, we kicked the study off this June. The project team is WFRC and the Mountain Land Association of Governments down in Utah County, along with UTA and UDOT, so the 4 joint agencies, as we call them. We have a consultant team led by Nelson Nygaard. Nelson Nygaard is really a leader in this area. They're writing a framework called the Fare Free Transit Evaluation Framework for the National Transit Cooperative Research Program. So they're leaders in the nation on this topic. And luckily, since we started this in June, we have some local case study to go off of as well, the Fare Free February that happened this past February. Through that, we saw positive outcomes. We saw an increase in ridership during the month, a decrease in safety incidents. We saw positive feedback in the experience of using transit from those who were new to the system. And we've heard so far that some of the largest or the biggest concerns from both the public and the policymakers are related to replacement funding if fares were to cease, as well as safety on board vehicles. And I'll just note that in the Fare Free February, one of the main takeaways was that safety incidents were reduced during that month. So this study is looking at those 2 topics as we do our evaluation. So the goals of the study are to evaluate the operational, financial, and community effects of zero fare transit, to gauge transit values of stakeholders from across the service area, to provide guidance about replacement funding for lost fare revenue, and then objectively inform the decision-making process around the future of zero fare transit. And so this study isn't resulting in a singular recommendation for what UTA or elected officials should do. It's going to be presenting a number of different scenarios and looking at the trade-off of those scenarios. So we started a few months ago, and the study is a pretty quick turnaround. We're hoping to be done by the end of the calendar year. We started looking at opportunities and challenges specific to UTA and the surrounding community, including some review of existing conditions, as well as literature review and national case studies. And currently we're looking at the evaluation of alternatives. So I'll just go into a little bit more detail about those, of what we've already completed. We did a existing conditions analysis of financial trends, including fare collection. So how much is UTA collecting in fares? What is the fare box recovery? How much is used to collect fares? How much it costs to actually collect the fares? Rider profile, who's using the system, who's paying what in terms of, are these fares coming from work and school passes? Are there other fare discounts? And I'll just note here some of the interesting things that we've learned so far is that the average UTA rider has about a median household income of about $36,000. And if we compare that to the region of $75,000, we can see that on average, the UTA riders have a little bit lower income and they have less access to vehicles. In the region, about only 5% of households have no access to a vehicle. And based on some surveys that UTA did, about 28% of their riders don't have access to vehicles. So we're looking at people who have less access to vehicles, are relying more on transit to get around and have a less income. So this is really meeting a need, a mobility need in the region. So we've also done a literature review of other case studies that have happened in the country and what some of the fare elasticities are on ridership or on funding. We did case studies on 3 agencies, SunTran and Tucson, Arizona, who went fare free at the beginning of the pandemic. They're also evaluating some long-term options, whether they'll continue to be fare free. Metro in Houston, Texas, studied the issue, decided not to go system-wide fare free, although they don't charge a fare for seniors or for people with disabilities. And then KCATA in Kansas City also went fare free at the beginning of the pandemic and decided to continue with that fare structure, although they do charge a fare for their on-demand and their micro transit services. And then we're also doing stakeholder engagement. So this includes 12 key person interviews we did with some mayors and commissioners from across the Wasatch Front, some legislators, representatives from the business and community groups, and then from the Department of Workforce Services and the Division of Multicultural Affairs. And these key person interviews, we're asking just sort of what are the values of transit? How can this study inform continuing conversations in this topic area? We weren't concerned with, are you in support of fare-free transit? But we're trying to provide data so that people can have intelligent conversations. And we wanted to know what data that could be, what data we could provide them. We're also meeting with certain policymakers and community groups. So tomorrow night we have a meeting with UTA, or tonight actually, sorry, UTA's Community Advisory Committee. So we're trying to get different levels of stakeholders involved in this study. So then for the rest of the year, like I said, we have identified a few different zero fare alternatives that we'll be evaluating in terms of operations. How does this impact UTA's ability to provide a fast, frequent network, for instance? Financial, what happens to revenue and how does that impact how UTA can provide transit, and then what impact might be on the community as a whole. And some of the alternatives we're looking at is the whole system going fare-free, just, for instance, the bus network going fare-free, a potential reduction across the board in fares, and then potential fare-free for low-income riders. Like I said, we're not producing one recommendation, but instead we're looking at trade-offs. So for instance, if you reduce fares across the board, you have a lower fare box recovery, but you still have the cost of collecting that fare. So you end up just reducing the amount of revenue that's generated and still all the same barriers to accessing transit in terms of a fare. But if you go system-wide, potentially open up the system more to riders, but of course you don't have that fare box recovery at all. So then we're planning on having a final documentation at the end of the year in time for the legislative session in case these conversations come back next year. They can be informed through the data that we're collecting. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about the study or about your opportunities to be involved.
I don't see
Okay.
any questions in the chat, Julie. But anybody have any questions for Julie relative to Zero Fair study and being involved in that or wanting to be involved in that?
And we can also come back when the report's wrapped up and give you some of the information that we collected.
Great. Excuse me. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Kip, for those presentations. Great information forthcoming. So we're going to move to item number 6, and we're going to turn some time over to the Hugh Van Wagenen. And then it looks like Nikki's going to take a few minutes as well and talk about freight and local delivery workshops coming up.
Thanks a lot, Spencer. This will be quick and more of an announcement. I just put into the chat a link to sign up for the upcoming Park City Mobile Active Transportation Tour. And Park City's been doing a lot of the work over the years to do an urban trail network. So we're going to be led by some Park City staff, some of the improvements they've done, some challenges they've had, and have a good opportunity to talk about that. So it's Tuesday, October 4th at 2 p.m. meeting at Park City Hall. And again, that link you can RSVP. If you need a bike, that we can provide those. Park City is proud to be the first all-electric shared bicycle fleet in the country, and they have some of those bikes available for us if you need one. It will be about a 5-mile ride, not incredibly strenuous, especially if you have an e-bike helping you out, if you're not comfortable just jumping on a regular bike. But again, 5 miles, we'll stop and talk about some different things. And that's October 4th. Please feel free to invite your colleagues and other people that would benefit from a tour like this. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Hugh. That was quick and easy. Well done, sir. So thank you for the link and get involved, everybody. That would probably be a pretty cool thing to participate in. So, all right, Nikki, it is your turn.
Thanks, Spencer. Like you had mentioned earlier, we W4C is kicking off a local delivery and urban freight study. We're in the very early stages of it, and the idea is to try to understand some current and future transportation patterns and distribution operations. You know, what are we seeing with warehouse development and workforce access needs, and some of those last mile strategies. So the outcome is going to be a toolkit for cities on best practices and recommendations for different community site types. But next week, a few of you have received some invitations. We have a couple freight workshops happening there's one on Tuesday, September 27th, which will be at our office from 10 till 11:30, and a second one up north in Clearfield City Hall on September 28th from 10 to 11:30. So we're just inviting you to participate in one of those two meetings. If you did not get an email, shoot me an email, drop your email at the, just in the link in the chat box here. And then one other thing is that we're also seeking feedback and just asking you to provide some information on what you're seeing with freight and goods movement and trends and practices in your cities. So if you could fill out that survey that I just dropped the link to, that would be great. It would help us with the study. So let me know if you are interested, and I'm sure we'll come back to this group for future updates.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. That was wonderful. So take the opportunity to participate in one of the meetings and make sure you get that link that was put in the chat. Okay. Awesome. Awesome blossom. Thank you very much. All right. Item number 7 is any other business we have to consider. So one of the things that we have talked about at length internally is just about in-person meetings again. I know we've talked about this previously and we've taken some votes on this, but our next meeting is December 14th. And we're contemplating potentially having an in-person meeting then, but wanted to get some feedback from the group relative to the desire to do so. So One of the things I will say is what Ted mentioned earlier about the networking. Virtual is a wonderful option. It's very convenient and it can be very effective, but there is a lot to be said about that personal touch of interacting in person. So just wanted to put that out there and see what kind of thoughts we have. Is there anybody who is loving the virtual and would love to stay virtual forever? We're wanting your feedback, everybody.
Even maybe once a year, right? Or something where we could see each other, coordinate, I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, I like that, Jory, too. If we even just do it once a year, I think virtual, like I said, is great, is a great option, but you know, is there opposition to doing once a year, gather together and rub shoulders from a safe distance or something to that effect? So one comment, virtual is, let me quote Scott. Virtual is great. That was Sherry. I want to stay virtual forever. Man, Allie, good for you. Virtual is great. Yeah, and I mean, virtual makes it so you can attend probably more often, which is completely fine, but I think there is a desire from some of the group to be in person. So we'd like to be able to balance that out in some way, shape, or form. So Steve Parkinson asked where the meeting would be. Well, obviously it would be in a central location that would be productive and effective for all those who would attend. I don't know, Clearfield.
This is Eldon Bingham at UDOT.
Yeah, Eldon.
The state various times during the period calls for surge days where they request that, you know, state employees, if they can, do remote. So there is that going on all the time based on the conditions that are going in the, you know, in the metropolitan area. So there are cases where the state employees are going to be surging, which means they're going to be remote linking into the network system. And I'm not sure how that will affect this, but at least some of the times I know the state employees will be at home. And that's me. I'm remote working and it works, you know, works great for me to be able to virtually come to these meetings.
No, thank you, Eldon. I appreciate that. I realize some organizations have kind of made that commitment to virtual or work from home or remote work. And so we want to be sensitive to that. We want to be responsive to that. But again, there has been some feedback that an in-person meeting maybe once throughout the year is not a huge impediment. It's not a huge request, but allows for a little bit more of that interaction that we used to have in some of these meetings. So I know Scott Hess from North Ogden, you know, was just talking about the commitment to drive and participate in that from up in his neck of the woods. So I can appreciate that as well. So I don't know what would be the best way to proceed if we send a survey to the group, or we kind of take this under advisement and see what would be best suited for a once a year meeting. I think planned in advance and prepared, maybe it works, but.
Now to Eldon's point, I was thinking if we were to do an in-person meeting once a year, it might be best to identify what time of the year we wouldn't coincide with like that telecommuting. Because I know that like during certain times of the year, because of the air quality, you know, being worse, you know, say for example, in the winter, there's going to be more of that need from the state level as well as some of our local governments, you know, saying stay home and telecommute if you can. So maybe we identify when there is better air quality that would allow us to commute.
Yeah, and thanks, Brad. Appreciate that. It looks like Lyle is committed to bring food for that in-person meeting, and Ted is committed to bring Skittles. So it's a win-win if we gather. So just keep that in mind, everybody. So anyways, so I think we have some good feedback here. It seems like there is a palette for maybe an in-person meeting, but as Brad said, to be, you know, cognizant of the time of year that we do it relative to air impacts. Sherry had made a comment just about being leaders as planners in this regard. And I don't know that meeting once a year in person negates that But it is something for us to be mindful of as we look at how we work as a body and what we choose to do. So, Jory, do you feel like we've gotten some good feedback from this, and maybe we can go from here? Dave thinks it results in more discussion if we meet in person. So
yeah, I received Melinda shot me a message in support of 2 times a year, but I think it's just, yeah, we were chatting privately, so it went directly there. We could do a poll, or Spencer, as the chair, you have some prerogative to, we can look at the dates and make sure we're outside of flu season or non-bad air quality, give it much advance notice so people can schedule, a half-hour drive time on both ends, something like that.
Yeah.
Steve made a recommendation that we all just start meeting at Spencer's office.
Looks big enough to hold us all.
It's gonna be cozy. Gonna be cozy.
It's not big enough to hold all of us.
Yeah, so I think we've got some good starting point. Yeah, I'd like to look at that, Jory, and see what dates we think would be most appropriate, taking everything into consideration. I'm not opposed to meeting more often. But again, I am happy to respect the group's wishes if one is enough and sufficient. I do think, and I've noticed this with meetings that I've attended, in person definitely spurs a lot more conversation. But again, we could have that here. It's just harder to do it because of the virtual aspect. So we'll do this. Let's do this. If this is okay by the group, Jory and I and whomever else from WFRC can discuss it and then put out some poll or survey relative to those dates or the opportunity, and then get some feedback, and then take that data and make some decisions, but hopefully communicate it out quickly how we choose. At this point, though, I don't know if December is going to be, it seems that the group's overall message is virtual, but so I think we'll probably stay virtual for December, given the time of year, and that may be of more concern to people. So. Okay.
Perfect.
And Steve is a typical soccer fan. He's booing right now. So, so there's that.
You're gonna fake an injury here pretty soon.
Steve, if you don't want Spencer to have the power, then you've got to, nominate yourself to become the TAC chair again, right? Knowing you've probably held it right before him. So
yeah, that's how I got here, is Mr. Parkinson. So, but okay, I think we'll go from there. If
Just forces all of you to come to meetings, and then you don't get elected.
All right. Well, I think everybody, that's it. So our next meeting will be December 14th. Put that on your calendar and be prepared to participate. And then also, if there's things that you heard today that you have questions on, make sure that you reach out or ask questions, reach out to WFRC staff. They've been phenomenal in providing us resources and information today. And so I want to make sure everybody gets questions answered when they do come. So, all right, I think that's it. If there's no other business, we'll consider our meeting adjourned.
Great job.
Thanks, everybody.
Let
Thanks
us know
all.
if you have any agenda items. We'll add them.
Thank you.